The title of your book is Essential Labor, Mothering as Social Change.
Yes.
I want to start very simply because we're going to use this term so much throughout our conversation. But what is considered care work and or essential labor?
To me, it is just the most basic stuff of life, right? So no single person makes it through the helplessness of infancy and childhood, the sort of explorations and tumult of adolescence and teenage years, and like the sort of wildness of early adulthood without someone taking care of them, right? Whether that's parents or a babysitter or a nanny or a preschool teacher, mentors, right? That's the stuff. Like, I really believe that care work, which is things like, taking a bath, feeding yourself, very basic stuff, having health, like human rights, basic things like that. That's the only real work that humans have to do on Earth. Like, we made up money. So if we all decided to stop believing in money, like, we could figure out a new way of organizing our lives, but no one could do anything without taking care
We gotta bathe.
Yeah, we gotta bathe, we gotta feed ourselves. And that's the work of life that never goes away. We all have to figure it out. We all relied on someone to give that to us, and most likely we will provide that to somebody else. It's really the thing that connects us as humans, and that's the thing that we don't value. Financially, culturally, we hide it in the home. Sometimes we just call it women's work, right? We don't pay people to do it, or we hire people to take care of our children, to take care of our disabled relatives, to take care of elders, and we pay them very low wages. And those people are predominantly women of color. So what I'm asking us to do is to, I'm asking, it's a bit of a stretch. I'm asking people to rethink our concept of work and what work we consider valuable.
That last part is it, really?
Yeah.
Like, what we consider valuable. I kept thinking that we valorize mothers in our country, but it's almost this faux valorization.
Absolutely.
Because we cheer them on Mother's Day, or we're moments where we're like, I had such a great mom, or my mom did we're not really doing anything to value them.
Yeah, and I think that's why we double down on these celebrations. But, my friends and I joke, we're like, I don't need a bouquet of flowers. I need paid family leave. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to get flowers, but I would take in its place real structural support, there are politicians who claim and hold parties that claim to be about family values, right? But then we don't guarantee family leave for fathers and mothers, or people who are adopting children,
right?
Or fostering children, taking care of elders who are sick, taking care of relatives who are sick. So we expect people to do all of that really for free without any support, The care economy is very real. We rely on that, right?
I want to hold on that because the care economy is a huge part of your book that I want to dig into. Just so that, because I'm so literal, care work would be mothers and fathers, technically, cleaning people.
Yeah.
Who else would fall under that category?
Childcare providers, right? Babysitters, early childhood educators. Teachers do a lot of care work. Yeah, those would be like the main ones. But also like health care workers, nurses, right? People who aren't necessarily, they're not the specialist who goes and like gives you the imaging and sits with you for 10 minutes and tells you what the diagnosis is. I'm talking about nurses who are hands-on, who are going to be the people who are changing your catheter, right? And who are really like at your bedside taking care of you. That's the kind of work that I'm talking about. And I think really like care work to me is people who are on the, like, one way of thinking about it is like whatever the age, if you're like on the front lines of like human bodily fluids, like you're doing care work for sure.
That's a good indication.
Yeah.
So the first part of your book is really about the history of caretaking in America. And then the second is more looking towards the future.
Yes, for sure.
I want to start with the first part.
Yeah.
Because I think to understand where we can go, we have to understand where we've been in a lot of ways here. How did we get to this place where we undervalue care so much in America?
Yeah. So I think it's I want to put it in a lot of context. This is a very uniquely American way that we live, and it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
I actually think it's pretty inhumane. Like, we have privatized human rights. Like, I think that if you're born, like, you deserve to have a place to live. You deserve like a basic guarantee in life, like, to have healthcare,
Yeah.
right? Like, we tie healthcare to a job, right? So these are some problems that we have. But other countries like provide paid family leave because they understand that investing in mothering, in parenting, and in care work is investing in the health of a society overall.
Mm-hmm.
And the other distinctly American thing that I want to point out is the reason why we are comfortable like expecting care work for free from mothers or paying very low wages is it's a direct result of American slavery. So the wealth in our nation was built on the backs of enslaved people who were treated as property and worked for no pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the home has always been a workplace for Black women in America. And so, enslaved people were emancipated, but we're still very much living with this idea that, when second wave feminism and Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique was like, women, I get it. Like, you can't, like, you need to find meaning for yourself outside of the home, which I support.
But it was very much white feminism.
Yes, it's white feminism, absolutely. And so women were like, great, I'm going to go outside of the home and do this work. But it never solved the issue of who was doing the domestic labor. So actually what they did was rehire Black women to work in the home, right? Or hire Black women, this time for wages, but very low wages. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we are very, very comfortable seeing Black women and women of color in general as being less human, mm-hmm. being less worthy, paying them those lower wages. And we talk about domestic labor and care work as being low-skilled, low-wage labor.
Yeah.
And, anyone who's had to spend more than 4 hours with a baby knows, like, that's not easy work. It's actually very hard. And I believe that this idea of low-skilled is really a myth that we perpetuate in order to justify paying people low wages.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the median wage for any worker in any industry in America is around $20 an hour, which is already not much money.
Yeah.
But so when you are looking at domestic workers, that drops down to a median wage of closer to $12 an hour. And nannies make the lowest median wage, which is $11.60 an hour.
It's so backwards too, because it's
backwards,
like
yes.
You're trusting these people with your children.
That's it. We say, like, what do we think is the most valuable, most precious thing in the world? It's our children, our future. And I really think it's shameful.
It's shameful
that we cannot pay people a living wage. Domestic workers are 3 times more likely to live in poverty than any other worker.
So you wrote a piece in The Atlantic, and I want to just quote you back to you so that people understand the percentages here, because I don't want to double down on facts, but I think it really drives your point home.
Yeah.
92% of domestic workers are women. 92. 57% of them are Black, Hispanic, Asian American, or Pacific Islander. Mm-hmm. And 62% of house cleaners are Latin American workers. And then you talk about the average pay. So $12 for domestic workers. The gap is widest for nannies, 97% of whom are women.
Yeah.
And they just earn $11.60.
Yeah.
And it's remained stagnant for decades.
Yeah. I mean, the cost of living, as everyone knows, like, has been going up and up and up and up. And domestic workers, their wages have remained low. Like, they've risen a slight bit, but nothing to closing that gap.
It's really shocking.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad that we have these numbers, and I'm glad that you want to spend a little time on that. Because when I was doing the research, I was like, this can't.
Yeah.
How can it be? Like, I think it's something that we all are sort of aware of, mm-hmm. but when you see the numbers, it's undeniable. And it is undeniable that we don't value these workers. We don't, and that's really, that's a hard thing to sit with, I do a care work as a mother, right? My mother was a nurse, right? But it's just like, these are, I read facts like that, and I'm fortunate, I grew up in like a fairly middle class upbringing, but I look like these workers are me. Mm-hmm. They look like me. I relate to a lot of these women. And that's a really hard thing I think that there are a lot of people in America who, even if they know that that's not right, they've never really had to confront that discomfort, right? And that reality. And
there's also not that much conversation around it.
oh yeah, definitely.
Like,
Yes.
I think part of the reason your book made such a huge splash was it was one of the first that really talked about it.
We think anything related to women or work that women or female people do is like not real work.
Yeah.
And we sort of like relegate it to the side. Stories and books about that are considered really niche, right? And so I'm proud, and I was stunned actually, but I'm glad that I could write a book that, I mean, to be able to like be on the Daily Show, I did something that was like sort of mainstream, right? Or like that struck a chord with a lot of people. And I knew that it would be relevant and timely because it came out of me being pissed because I'm a writer, I have a fairly successful career, but I do not get health insurance and I do not get a regular paycheck in my job. And my husband does. And so in the pandemic, when we had no childcare, we were like, we will prioritize your work because we need money, right?
And your healthcare.
Yes, yeah. And me, I'm like, you know, I'm just kind of here writing things, like I have a deadline like on the horizon, right? And so it was hard. I mean, in some ways it was the easiest thing to do because I like, obviously, this is what we should do, this is what makes sense. And I did really feel like, what's the most important thing I could be doing right now? It's not writing an article, it's not making a podcast, it's taking care of my kids. It's making sure they don't get sick and die, right?
Yeah.
It's in that sense too, is like keeping us away from people, keeping our communities safe.
Yeah.
And so, and it came out of like this tension of feeling like in the early pandemic, do you remember every day at 7 p.m. in New York City, people would be hanging out windows and like banging pots and pans and like cheering on our essential workers. And I loved that. Healthcare workers, right? Like firemen, sanitation workers, like they're all essential. But I can't deny it. I was sitting here being like,
how about the parents?
what about me?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about parents who are working 24/7? A lot of people are working professional jobs. They're trying to take care of their families and it's all happening at home.
Yeah.
And I just was like, this is not okay. And also at that time, you know, childcare centers were shutting down, and without people being able to bring like the nannies into their house or the babysitters or house cleaners, people were really struggling. And we were seeing suddenly that invisible labor, like the loss of it was being felt by a lot of people.
It brought it to the surface in
Yes.
a way that people hadn't experienced
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Anthropologist David Graeber wrote in 2018, in our society, there seems to be a general rule that the more obviously one's work benefits other people, the less one is likely to be paid for it. I've heard you say the idea that domestic labor is less valuable than professional work is actually a myth.
Yeah.
So can you explain that?
I mean, it goes back to the way I think the easiest way to summarize it is to say, like, domestic labor is the work that makes all other work possible.
Right.
Right? Like, if you weren't able to feed yourself and you weren't able to bathe, like, and you didn't have like a safe place to go to the bathroom, like you couldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
We couldn't be doing this, right? Like that's the bottom line. And it is what underlies everything. And we can't actually take it for granted.
A lot of moms today are doing, I should say a lot of parents today are doing what villages did to raise kids in the past. And like, I know people throw that around, but it's not a euphemism.
No,
Like,
it's a literal village.
it's really like one or two people are doing what true communities were doing to raise kids.
Yeah.
I even see it like in the last 40 years, it's gotten worse. I think there used to be neighborhoods where there was like, you know, blocks where there were one or two people that kind of like watched over the kids a little bit.
Yeah.
That doesn't really exist anymore. But you say that capitalism relies on unpaid labor, and that's kind of the brokenness here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one thing that we've never really dealt with. American capitalism, the way our society runs, relies on domestic labor. Like the whole idea, okay, so there's certain things we take for granted about American life that are based on this myth that is so far from reality. So my child who's in second grade gets out of school every day at 2:25 p.m. and on Wednesdays she gets out at 1:10. I'm not done working yet, right? Like the whole idea, like the way school hours function is based on the idea that there's someone who goes and works 9 to 5, and that's the dad, and there's someone who's home to pick up the kids and take care of the kids. And, you know, at this point, the majority of households have, like with two parents, have two working parents, people who work outside of the home. Every parent is a working parent, whether you work outside of the home or not. But yeah, like, so there are these ways that society is built up that just does not acknowledge that, you know, and it's time for us to really, you know, I think since 2020, we've been having a series of reckonings, is what I've heard, you know, but we haven't really reckoned with that. We haven't figured out a way to compensate people for that labor. And I believe that we should be. You know, Oxfam did a study, it was in 2019, where they said that if women in America were compensated minimum wage for all of the domestic labor that they do currently unpaid, it would be like, I want to say it's like $3.1 trillion.
That is so wild. There's other countries that are doing this way better than we are. What are some of the models that you see that work, like something that we really could adopt?
Yeah, well, I mean, Canada right now, it has, I think it was working in different provinces, but now it's universal where you can, I think it's something like $8 or $10 a day childcare. You can just send your kid to school. Like, I mean, I pay $1,300 a month for my daughter to go to preschool. And a lot of times, childcare and early childhood education can cost more than like college. People pay so much money to have their children in childcare, and we should have affordable childcare. And that's something that is like in Canada, in Germany, and a lot of countries in Europe have that. I mean, the US is, I believe, the only developed, industrialized country that doesn't have federally guaranteed family leave.
It all seems so inefficient to me for like for a capitalistic society that runs on efficiency and making money. It's so inefficient.
Well, care work is inefficient, right? So like, I want to acknowledge that. Care work is slow, right?
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, caring for a child is like, I mean, anyone with a child knows, like sometimes
I don't have one, so
but like,
tell me.
You can imagine, like getting someone like out the door sometimes involves someone getting undressed 4 times, right? Like, and so it's messy, right? Like it's hard to, and that's why I think they want to just keep that hidden. So you can just keep going. Keep all of the stuff that involves like cleaning up poop, or somebody threw up, or somebody got a bloody nose. Like that's life. Like life is like that. And I think the speed at which capitalism moves, the speed at which America moves it's squashing like.
We want to skip over that part.
Yeah. So there's that kind of stuff that I think is really, that's hard. And so, I mean, I realize that I'm in the minority, but I'm like, I don't know if they all just like slow down like, and chill, right? Like 40 hours a week, like people fought to have a 40-hour a week work week. And they said like each day, 24 hours, it was unions who did this. It was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, and 8 hours for what you will. You know, like just the idea of leisure and like all that kind of stuff. When you think about what the most valuable thing in your life is, like what do you think of?
The relationships that matter to me.
Okay.
That's everyone's answer, right?
And you can't quantify that.
Yeah.
Like you can't assign a dollar amount to it. And I think that's where, you know, David Graeber, who you quoted, also had a quote about how like these systems of like care exploitation can be undone by the thing they run on, which is love, right? Like love is inefficient. Caring for someone, like you have to get to know them, you slow it down, right? And that's exactly what care work is. And I wish that we could prioritize that. I'm not saying don't go out and work and don't have a job, but also like, why are we valuing production over like maintenance, nurturing, right? Like,
you know, you in your book, you talk about your upbringing and being Filipino, and I find it fascinating that you were the one to bring this message into the world, because it seems like Filipino culture really values care in a different way.
Oh yeah, I mean, well,
like you have this different perspective.
I think that it's, I mean, I think it was, I just love this question. Thank you. I love talking about being Filipino. Filipinos we're many, many things, but we're very joyful. Not all the time, but like gregarious, like love to perform, love to like party and get together and be with family and take care of people, feed people. That's a huge part of the culture. But I mean, the idea of Filipinas, as Filipino women specifically as caretakers, that I think that will be familiar to a lot of people here in America. Because if you've ever gone to the hospital, most likely you've encountered a Filipino nurse. And so that is, it's not just because, oh, Filipinos are great caretakers. It's because, and this is the story of my own family. Like, so when I was trying to figure out how to write the history of care work in America, I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I rely on a lot of personal narrative, And I was like, my ancestors were not enslaved. Like, I'm not sure the best way into this. And there was a statistic that came out during COVID, which was that, so Filipina nurses are 4% of the nursing workforce in America, but they were like 34% of COVID-related nursing deaths.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a huge discrepancy.
Yes. And that like stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, how does that happen, right? And Filipino nurses are overrepresented in ICUs and in critical care positions, which is where you're going to find COVID patients, right? And that's because when they came to America, Filipino nurses were more willing to take these jobs that were like physically intimate with patients and that white nurses didn't want, because it's like harder physical labor. And this is like something that we all kind of know too. A lot of immigrants in America take jobs that Americans who were born here don't want, that white Americans don't want. But so, my mom became a nurse. My father, who's the first person in his family to go to college, became a doctor because the Philippines was an American colony. We don't talk about this very much, but it was an American colony for the first half of the 20th century. And they built infrastructure like public schools where my parents were educated in English. And then they built nursing and medical schools. And they said this is a pathway to make more money, economic opportunity, which is true. But amongst themselves, Americans talked about it as a way to like sanitize a population that was like inherently dirty and backwards and diseased. And so, like I'm the beneficiary of this system, but it started because of a belief in the lesser nature and the lower value of Filipinos. And so my parents came because there was a healthcare worker shortage in the United States after World War II. And so in 1965, the US government passed a law that said for highly skilled immigrants, they lifted the quotas and welcomed them to America. And that's when my parents came over. And that's when a lot of Filipino immigrants came over, and they were highly skilled workers, like nurses and doctors. And that's kind of how Filipinos became caretakers,
Part of the care network.
I think it's beautiful.
The piece in The Atlantic that you wrote talks about the care crisis. That's a term that you use a lot that I hadn't heard, actually.
Yeah.
And so you say women who can easily work outside the home are still not free or unburdened from other people. We are dependent on our nannies, cleaners, personal Instacart shoppers, DoorDash delivery drivers, parents, co-parents, and in-laws. The domestic load is as heavy as ever, but those who have means often spread it out among multiple people. This is not real progress. That part. Because it can feel like it's progress.
Yeah. And I think sharing the load is great.
Yeah.
But I don't think it should be sharing the load with people who remain anonymous to you and who get paid like very low wages and have absolutely no rights as workers.
And it's not progress if it's only available to a small sect of people.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a step towards acknowledging, life in America is really hard. Like we need each other. Like I can't do like the way the school week runs, like I pick up my friend's kids on Tuesdays. She picks up my kids on Thursdays. On Mondays, my daughter's friend Ruth comes to our house. On Wednesdays, like we do this sort of like patchwork village, like you were talking about, right? But
that's because you're you. Like my friends don't have that experience in LA. They're very isolated. That's their biggest complaint.
That's the thing is like, and that's America has sort of set it up that way. And so then people also feel like I can't have kids because it's too expensive, right? I can't, it all seems like a big burden.
Right, when like really you set up this beautiful.
It's the thing, relationships are exactly what makes life worth living. And so, I'm realistic. Like I would like to burn the system down. I'm not gonna lie, right? And like start over. I don't know that we're gonna be able to do that, right? And I wanna also acknowledge that like, we are making progress. I want to, it's not, I'm not just saying this, like I am hopeful. We elected the current administration, like they ran on paid leave. They have not delivered, but they ran on it. We were talking about care as infrastructure. Those are things that we heard, right? And we're closer than ever to having those things. I wanna say that 8 out of 10 voters in America support paid family leave. They support investments in community centers and community-based care and home-based care, that kind of stuff. And when you're talking about that number of people, like that transcends political party. Like I really think in our country, we are a caring majority. but we're all made to feel like care is like our individual duties. But really it's the kind of thing that should be, it's universal. It's a very wonderful unifying force. Like if I were to ask you, like, who raised you? Like, who took care of you that like encouraged you to be you?
Yeah, I would name a number of people. It wouldn't just be my mom and dad.
Yeah.
It's grandparents, it's some teachers, it's some of my parents' friends. You're right.
Yeah, and I think it's a really beautiful thing.
great
When you
question.
ask someone, we tend to think of care stuff as like it's private. But if you ask
beautiful.
someone for a care story, like they'll share something really personal and beautiful. And then you'll get a chance to do that, and you'll find that it's actually it's a wonderful way to connect with people.
So this is Mothering as Social Change. And one of the most interesting and kind of surprising things that you noted in here was that mothering is a social responsibility because it impacts society on a structural level. What I'm about to say is going to sound like duh, but I never thought about it. Mental health, poverty, crime rates, they can all be connected to mothering.
Yeah. I mean, people who are struggling later in life, it's probably because they didn't experience sufficient care when they were younger, because maybe they spent a lot of time alone because their parents were working, right? Or their parents were caught in, cycles of generational trauma that left them with unable to care for them in ways that they would want to, right? And so I just think about that, it is I kind of think as mothering as the earliest public health intervention that we could have. And it is really, you are teaching young people about the world, right? And I think about this a lot. I have 2 daughters, and I think about how long it took me as a woman of color in America to really be I'm enough as I am, and my story is valuable. I'm still working on that. You know what I mean? And I don't think that anyone, I think a lot of people will work on that, and that's the work of life. But I just feel I can give that to my daughters so much earlier. You know what I mean? They can enter the world knowing that they are deserving, right? That they don't have to be quiet. They don't have to make themselves small. And I think about that, you have an opportunity to talk to the people who are going to be the next generation of neighbors, community members, writers, politicians, this is literally the next generation, and they can make choices that make it so that people don't have to choose between paying their bills, right, or getting their medicine, right, or their rent check, and football supplies or uniforms or whatever people need, it's small, right? And I think this is one thing too I think about, people who do care work we are often overwhelmed, and kind of the last thing we need is you need another thing to do. You need to get involved in the fight for social change, right? You need to donate, you need to your time. It's wonderful if you are able to do those things, but we need everyone at every level. We need politicians, and I want to remind people who are taking care of children every single day, you're an essential worker, and you are making a difference. A difference in one child's life is world changing, And I think like what we were saying, who made you feel special? That's stuff that they carry with them for life. And I'm not just blowing smoke up people's ass. It really matters. And there's other ways of making
But
an
no
impact,
one's saying that. Isn't that interesting? It seems like such an obvious thing to say. And nobody's really, I just saw a video online of 3 men that were in prison, and they had learned in this course to do tapping for anxiety and affirmations.
Oh, yeah.
And they were I am enough, I am whole. And it felt revolutionary kind of, and it's not. It shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't be, but it is.
It is,
yeah. And that's another reason why I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
There were generations of people who didn't have that. And we are in a position where we can raise, and you don't have to be a parent, right?
I want to be as hopeful as you, though, because...
Oh, I work at being hopeful, just so you know.
Because I was a little hopeful in 2021 with the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah. And then
it was the first thing. What was it called? Was it childcare, or was it called paid family leave? I think
which
it was
one? The child. Well, there was the child tax credit, where for a while people were getting money,
right?
And for 6 months, parents were getting stipends and money from the government. And it actually did lift 4 million children out of poverty. You know, like people were able to take care of their basic needs. And then Congress just let it expire.
But the thing is like, regardless of, say we all agreed that the bill had to get cut. It was too much money. That's.
I mean, I have a hard time even saying that, but
I agree. But let's, for argument's sake, paid family leave was the first thing to get cut. It was like, damn, we
were like started at 12, and they're like, well, how about 6? How about 4? How about 2? You know,
there were tons of things to cut. Paid family leave was the first, and that's why I have a hard. Do you think in your lifetime we will see some form of paid family leave in our country?
Yes, I do, because we almost had it, right?
Yeah.
And I like it's. I'm not someone who can be like relentlessly optimistic, right? I felt the same thing that you did. I was pissed again, right? I was angry.
So was Reshma Soujani.
Yes, yeah. And so,
she was also pissed.
And that's how we got Marshall Plan for Mothers. We got all of this. And the thing is, people want to talk about this. People believe in this. The majority of people in America, right? Like our government is not representing us, right?
Yeah.
But I believe in people, and I see people taking care of people all the time. You know, like that's how I get by through community. It's how we survived the pandemic. We did not survive the pandemic because the government sent us like 4 tests. You know what I mean? We survived the pandemic because we took care of each other. People formed pods, like people like started Zoom groups. They found ways to connect, right? And that's the most human urge. And that's what we are built to do. We're hardwired. Humans are social people. We want to take care of people. We want to be taken care of. Relationships are the most important thing. And so that gives me some hope. And the other thing is like, it's okay to be discouraged and like take a few weeks off. For me, it's not an option. It's not an option to give up hope.
Yeah.
You know, that's a really, and I get it. Like we're human beings, like it's hard, but like we can talk about that, you know, and like, I'm happy to talk about it in a way that maybe makes someone else realize like, okay, like I'm not alone, but I want to keep fighting. Like I can't think of a better fight to be in than to like insist on like that we deserve care and that our caregivers deserve care. Like I'm just out here. I'm not going to stop.
So in your book, and you mentioned your 2 daughters, but you say that your kids will have fewer financial resources than you did.
Yeah.
But you already know that you have given them more of a sense of self and confidence and community than my parents. That really hit me. It made me kind of emotional. I think a lot of people feel that way because the state of our economy, that's just how it kind of happened. I even have friends who are, I think, nervous to have kids because they're like, I don't want to bring kids into this type of world.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at that perspective?
My parents worked really hard, you know, like they came to America with very little, and I like worked themselves into the middle class. And I do feel like I'm fortunate enough to be able to be comfortable enough to be like, I can step down. Like I am not going to give my kids the same level of comfort that my parents gave me, you know, but like my husband, who's white, grew up poor on like public assistance, you know, and like there's just so much more to life than, you know, like of course I want to give my kids everything they want, but in the end, like they're loved, you know, and like that is, you need more than just love. Like love is not enough, but they have a good life. I know they do. You know, they have what they need and they have people and they know more than I ever did. Like, and, you know, I want to say my parents, they were like incredible. They came to a new country. They didn't know anyone. Like they worked asses off, you know, like they were focused on survival. So they weren't really as interested in having a conversation with me about my emotions, right? Like, you know, but like I can give that to my daughters and like, I think they're better prepared to like enter the world as like empathetic, like fully human beings who can like, you know, follow their dreams and like be supportive friends and community members. You know, I've had talks, my parents have read the book.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm sure that was sort of hard for them to read and process. Like I think initially my mom felt like a lot of what I was writing was like a rejection of them. And, you know, I'm sort of horrified by that. And I've talked to her about it. Like, that's not how I see it. Like, I'm so grateful to them. But I feel like the way that I can honor everything they did for me is to really fully be who I am. And I want more. I want more for them. I wanted more for like my parents in their like former years, right? And I want more for myself, and I want more for my people and my kids.
It was beautiful and hard to say sometimes. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of first generation kids feel that, you know, and a lot of what I don't know that I write for them. I write very selfishly, like for myself. But
I think that's why people connect with it though, because I think sometimes these concepts are hard to either understand or buy into because they don't feel as personal. Like you gave people a story to hang on to.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I've learned. It's kind of a magical thing about writing. You know, I grew up I know that my stories are valuable, but I have this sort of like definitely internalized racism that is like, no one's just going to care about your story, right? I feel like I always have to tie it to like statistics and to a larger social message, right? To be useful.
Wait, can I ask a question about that? So you say that feeling is tied to racism.
Yeah.
I would expect you to say tied to the patriarchy. So tell me what you mean.
I mean, I think those things go hand in hand in this country. You know, I feel like, the way that my parents raised me was like, to be valuable, to be, like contribute to society, you have to be legible to white people, right? You have to, and my parents like spoke English as a second language.
Yeah.
My dad raised us only speaking English, not Tagalog, and I like feel sad about that, and I feel shame about never having learned Tagalog, but it's because he faced discrimination with his accent, and he didn't want me to ever have that. Wow. So there's this idea of like, to be like being white and sounding white and being eloquent and all of that stuff is really tied into being academically successful, is like tied up mostly like, yeah. So it's like, it's like a double whammy though, because I'm a woman of color, and I think patriarchy for sure is like, oh, women like.
No, but thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that our culture is talking about motherhood. Especially in the way that you and Reshma Soujani and Eve Rodsky, all these amazing women are talking about it. It's very practical as well. Are we not talking about fatherhood enough?
Probably yes. Yeah, I think that's true. We're not talking about it enough.
Like, I feel like we're talking about motherhood and not parenthood as much.
Well, yes. And I will admit, like when I talk about mothering, it's really important to me to like, I talk about mothering as a verb. And that's something that I've done more of. I don't talk as much about motherhood, which is a noun and feels sort of static to me. But mothering, which is like care work, it's all repetitive action. That's like what a lot of mothering is. And so I'm not the first person to say this. Like there's Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who edited an anthology called Revolutionary Mothering, talks about how like mothering is not gender specific, it's not parent specific. Anyone who's involved in the act of like nurturing life, like it's a way of calling a lot of people in. Like anyone can be involved in mothering.
Right.
Right.
Like a friend can mother you.
Yeah, like an auntie, like, like like a stranger, like a very kind stranger can mother you, right? Help you find your way, right? There's things like that. And so, so I admit though, like I'm a woman, like I am coming more strongly from that point of view. I am here for conversations about fatherhood. And the people that need to have that are fathers. Like I did an interview a while ago with a really thoughtful man.
That's interesting.
Who was like, I sometimes get jealous, right? Like, he's like, I'm committed to the work. I think a lot about how I can be an equal partner. Like I raise my children. I don't want it to fall to my wife. But like, you guys have like these online groups. You have like more ways to connect. Like, and I find myself feeling like kind of sad about that. And I was like, do you know how, I hear you. But do you know how those mother online groups started? Like moms made those.
We started a group text.
Yeah. And I'm like, I support you, man. Go out there. Like do it. Right. But it's not but
it's not a cultural conversation really.
Yeah. But fathers can start that cultural conversation as mothers have started this one. Do you think that like the patriarchy was like, let's start a mothering conversation? No. People have insisting on that. And that's kind of the next level, frontier. Like I want to support that, but that's not I don't need another thing to do,
So I love when I catch myself being like part of the problem, because I'm like such a great learning moment. And in my head, I'm thinking, why are we not talking about fatherhood as if women should be the ones? And you're right.
Yeah. Like you can have a guest on here. Sorry, I'm not trying to challenge you, but like you can have a guest on here who's like, my husband is a man who is like, he's a white man who is like, I want to do more. And I, in many ways, have like been late to acknowledge the ways in which like I've benefited from this system every day of my life. You know what I mean? And like, so that's an ongoing conversation that we have. But like, yeah, let's hear from dads. Like, I want to hear from dads. Like,
right.
I definitely
Where are they
do.
at?
Yeah.
So there's this theory floating around that I've heard that one of the reasons people don't respect the earth is because we call it Mother Nature. What do you think about that?
What do I think about that? I mean,
I know it's not the problem.
yeah.
It's not the reason we have the climate crisis.
I think I'll be honest. Like, I'm not wild about like the gendering of things in general. Or when people are like, well, that look is really feminine. And I'm like, what's that? Like, what does that mean? But I will say this, like, it's similar. Like, it's an exploitative relationship that we have with the earth. Like, we couldn't possibly come up with energy alternatives. We just keep taking as much oil as we can, extract and take and take and take. Right? And I think it's similar. Like, a mother's love is endless. Like what you were saying, we like valorize mothers, and the whole idea is like, my mother sacrificed everything for me. That's not great, right? Like, the earth shouldn't sacrifice so that we can drive cars, you know what I mean? Or like have a gas stove, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's because we call her Mother Earth. And I also think that is like a pre-capitalist, like, I mean, I want to honor the sort of like indigenous nature of that, of like Pachamama, right? Or like Gaia, like, yeah, like life and women are powerful.
Yeah.
And Audre Lorde said women are powerful and dangerous, right? And so, yeah, like you want to control that power. You want to take from it and like, you know, I think that there's something there, yeah. Even if I initially was like, nah, I will say that I think there is something there.
I do too. That's why I wanted to get your opinion. It's not the reason we have the climate crisis, but
like, let's talk about how it is true or how I see it manifesting.
Okay, thanks for spitballing with me.
Yeah, sure, totally.
Okay, a little rapid fire.
Okay.
A trip that changed your life.
After my husband and I got married, we had saved money for like 3 years, and we traveled the world for almost a year. So we spent like 3 months in South America. So cool. 3 months West and East Africa, and then 3 months in Southeast Asia.
That is so cool.
And it was like a really fun way to start a marriage.
What was your first job?
My first job was at the Pippin's Twin Kiss in my hometown of Danville, Pennsylvania, where I served soft serve ice cream.
Yum.
And through a little window. And then I also worked, I like grilled hamburgers and fried French fries.
A really supportive gesture that a mom friend has made for you.
Didn't ask. Didn't plan, just left groceries and food outside of my door. Nice. Like, didn't ask me to do any thinking, just left stuff for me. Yeah.
You said that hope is a discipline.
Yeah.
What are you hopeful about right now?
I am hopeful about, I've been going through some like stuff in my personal life and in my family, and like thinking about my family of origin and like patterns that are repeating. And I feel really hopeful that, you know, to take it away from society and all of that stuff, just like that I am capable of great personal change, and that the people close to me are able to do that, and that we as human beings continue to grow and to learn, even if that's really uncomfortable, that people are still committed to doing that makes me so hopeful.
I'm gonna ask you your question. Who really took care of you? Who made you you?
There's been a lot of people like you. I can think of like several people. But today I think about when I was in high school, I had a teacher, her name was Anna Kelbig. And she was like the school newspaper advisor. And she was like my speech and debate coach. And she was just like, oh, you and books and words, like this is what you're gonna do. Like this is what you're meant to do. And I didn't see that in myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't totally understand, but I was like, well, if Mrs. Helbig thinks that I can do this. She didn't treat me as a child, and she didn't treat me as a grown-up. She treated me like exactly as I was. At that time, I was like a young adult.
That's cool.
And she treated me that way and like trusted me with like conversations and ideas that I could like grow into. And I still think about her a lot.
That's kind of what you do now, conversations and ideas. So she was a part of it.
There you go.
What's a book you have read that has changed your life? Something you think everybody should read?
Oh, I think everyone should read Kindred by Octavia Butler. It is sort of speculative fiction, I think is what it's called. And it's a time travel-y novel, and I think everyone in America should read it because it has, without giving too much away, it has a way of explaining the way that anyone who lives in America is like complicit and implicated in our history, but can also move beyond our history.
Interesting. The smartest decision you've ever made?
I decided about like 4 years ago that I was only interested in making my life easier. Which doesn't mean that I'm not willing to work, but I'm not trying to make anything harder.
So one of my favorite questions that I ask people is, what would it look like if it were easy? Because I think we always complicate things.
Yeah.
Okay. Question everything. 52 cards.
Okay.
Pick whichever one calls you.
Oh my God, I love this. Oh no, here. No. Here we go.
Perfect.
Am I asking you this?
No,
Or
it's
do I have
you.
to answer
Yeah,
this?
you have to answer.
Okay. When have you felt the closest to magic in your life? For me, it's whenever I'm on a shore and I see bioluminescence. I mean, that's trippy, right? Like, what else? I mean, I know it's technically like bacteria or something, but it's magic, right? And also bacteria is like cool. Like it gets a bad rap, but it's also very cool. And I think like it's nature. When I have these moments of feeling like this is always out here, I'm part of nature, and like I share in something with this. And when I feel that sort of like tingly bit of the universe, that's magic to me.
I just had a stylist in earlier, and she said, designers are my rock stars. And I was looking at her, and I was looking at you, and I'm like, writers are my rock stars.
Oh.
And so first of all, you have to sign my book.
Okay.
But I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
You're a rock star.